to start by thanking all of you for coming to remember the very important tiny people who we are missing in our lives today. They all matter. They were physically here with us, and I am honored to stand beside you in your grief, no matter where you are in your journey, to remember and to reflect with you. There is something to be said about the connection that bereaved parents have. The mothers and fathers within this group love fiercely. They are all part of a group which they do not wish to be a part of. To the wonderful people who came here today, who love us, who support us, who love our children, who sit and listen to us, who really care about how we are doing, who check up on their strong friend. It is you who make a difference in our lives. We need those rare breed of individuals who will stick around after a certain amount of time, after the rest of the world has moved on from our tragedy and we are left alone with our grief. What a scary place that can be. Thank you for giving us a safe place to share our grief and our feelings, allowing us to breathe as we learn how to navigate this new world we have entered and the new us we have become. Those special individuals have learned to become comfortable with the uncomfortable feelings and sometimes actions that bereaved parents display. Now to introduce myself. My name is Angelo Tasson, and I am the mother of 4 beautiful children, Gianna, Calvin, Angelo, and Bianca. My husband's name is Jim, and together we are quite the team. Today I am here to honor and to share my son Angelo with all of you. Angelo is my 3rd child, and he is no longer physically here with us. I choose to believe that Angelo is always with me, and I am always with him. Surely pieces of me are wherever Angelo is, and so until the day when I hope to be with him again, will continue to walk this earth and tell everyone about Angelo Vincent Tasson. Angelo's beginning makes me smile. I recall being very nauseated, tired, and just not myself after our children's dance recital in May of 2016. We pondered having another child, but assumed we would need fertility intervention, as was the case with our 2 oldest children. With no current plans of pregnancy, I assumed it wasn't a likely possibility. At that time, I had been a labor and delivery nurse for 9 years. Pregnancy was always on my mind. I had to check, and I had to take a pregnancy test, and I was pregnant. Wow, how'd that happen? A surge of excitement and joy rushed through my body. Just thinking about the beautiful little person that was being created without my knowledge. There were instant plans to love and to care for this little being, a mother's love. I told my husband and we called our OB right away. We had an ultrasound the very next day to verify the pregnancy and see how far along I was. The scan revealed that I was having a singleton pregnancy and I was due January 28th, 2017. Our pregnancy with Angelo progressed without complication. We reached our anatomy scan around 20 weeks, and we were reassured at this point our child appeared to be healthy and he or she was thriving. We chose not to find the gender out. Soon we entered the viability range, where some people start to breathe a little easier, knowing that infants this gestation have lived to go home. In no time at all, it was Tuesday, December 27th. I was late preterm and going in for our weekly checkups with our OB. My checkup that Tuesday went as expected. I was screened for GBS. Our baby and myself were checked out and we were both healthy. For those of you who are not aware of what GBS is a type of bacteria that is naturally found in the digestive and lower reproductive tract of both men and women. A woman's GBS status can change, so a woman can screen negative but be colonized later in pregnancy, meaning GBS can come and go. I I screened negative with all of my children. 3 days later, it was December 30th, 2016. This day would change our lives forever. It was the start of a forced new life, a life that would lead us to both love and loss. We decided to bring our children to the nearby water park to play for the day. We wanted them to have some fun with us before their new brother and sister were due to arrive. I remember very vividly washing up and feeling a warm sensation running down my leg. I knew there was amniotic fluid. Panic rushed through my body. Knowing that I was only 35 weeks and 6 days made me worry that something was wrong. Pregnancy was not a burden on me, and I would much rather have my baby inside to grow until term. I called to let my coworkers know that I would be coming in and that my water had broken home. One of the first things that my coworker and I discussed was my GBS status. She said the lab result had come back that morning and that I was GBS negative. We went to the hospital and labor started slowly, which was urgent for me. Other than my late preterm status, nothing was clinically alarming, and yet my intuition was telling me something could be wrong. I kept questioning everything in my head. What if the baby doesn't breathe? I kept asking. I was reassured by my friends that my labor was progressing and that the baby appeared to be healthy so far from the monitoring standpoint. I was very confident in the care that I was receiving. I worked with the best group of doctors and nurses who were well trained and skilled at what they did. After some flipping and coaching, we were ready to start pushing. Big deep breath and push. 1. Good job, Nick. 2. Oh my God, OP. So for those of you that don't know what OP is, it just means the baby's sunny side up. Usually they're facing down when they're born. 3. What are you? What are you? Oh my gosh, it's a boy. Hi, Angelo. My friends proudly announced. 1955. A strong, loud cry came from Angelo. He was pink, vigorous, and screaming. A sigh of relief. I will never forget that scenario ever. I remember it all in slow motion. My first thought and words were, Mama loves little boys, and you look just like Gia. I could hardly believe my beautiful baby was here. He was a little boy. He was crying, rooting, warm and pink. I remember my husband's sweet face when he saw his son for the first time. He looked so very proud to be a daddy again for the 3rd time. This baby was so very loved thus far, and we could hardly wait to show him so much more unconditional, never wavering love in his life. After a quick checkup, Angelo was brought back to me and was placed skin to skin on my chest. He was just a little cold, and knowing that Angelo was a late preterm infant, we didn't question this value. I cuddled him in so tight with a warm blanket and did what I did with all of my babies. I nursed him. I remember staring at his tiny face and thinking how perfect and symmetrical his features were. He had the sweetest little flare to his nostrils, perfect bowed lips, and the classic Tasson baby philtrum. A true little Italian boy. He held up so well to the name we had chosen for him, Angelo Vincent. I wish I could relive these precious moments with my son. For a while, these beautiful moments were tucked away deep in my brain. Trauma took over. Visions of what was to come still made my stomach turn and wake me up from a deep sleep and in a panic. Our beautiful baby started to experience some respiratory distress. He was working hard to breathe, and at first it appeared to be an expected sign of a late preterm infant. Angelo was taken to the infant warmer and treated appropriately. I remember feeling helpless. If I would have been working, I would be helping my coworkers take care of this baby. Instead, I did the only thing that I could do at the time, pump milk for him. I kept telling myself, Nikki, the baby is likely going to NICU. You need to feed the baby, so you better just start pumping. After a couple of hours, Angelo's condition started to decline further. The NICU was called, and they were enrolled to help. Watching your child struggle to breathe is such a helpless feeling. The anxiety within me wanted to burst out like a caged animal. I wanted to control the situation in which I had no control over. When the NICU arrived, I understood very well what was happening, and I knew they needed to do their job without being in the way, so I graciously stepped aside. I let them work to stabilize Angelo. My husband and a couple of nurses told me to look over at his face. Angelo opened his eyes and looked over at me, as if no one else was in the room but him and I. We were a team. We had been together for the past several months on an intimate relationship between mother and child. He could hear my heartbeat and hear me talking to him. I could feel his jabs and kicks. He looked over at a backwards angle, locked eyes with mine, and didn't stop his gaze for 8 seconds. I walked over to him and kissed his forehead and said, "Mommy loves you, Angelo." Just as quick as he opened his bright eyes, he closed them, and I never saw my son open his eyes again. This moment was a gift from Angelo to me. He was fighting hard, and he knew I was his mommy. We followed the ambulance to the NICU. We were told that our son was stabilized, but not out of the woods yet. I was asked so many times what my dubious status was. It always was negative. I was screened 3 days prior, it was negative. It was quite frustrating to be asked the same question over and over and over. I didn't even think, looking back, what could have been causing my son to be ill. I just knew it was bad. We were not sure yet what was causing him to decline so rapidly. It was time to see him again in the NICU. My healthy baby looked so gray. He was swollen and full of tubes and monitors. I was so sick to my stomach. I literally could not handle what was happening before my eyes, and I knew deep down how bad the situation was. I had never seen a baby look that bad in all of my OB career. All I could do was grip the side rail of the bed. I wanted someone to knock me out, so I didn't know that I was a person. I didn't want this to happen, and how could it happen? The neonatologist came in moments later and needed consent for some tests and treatments. I very frankly asked him if Angelo was going to die. This very compassionate physician said 25% of babies with a condition like Angelo's do not make it. And he shook his head up and down ever so slowly. I became tingly all over my entire body. A lump formed in the back of my throat. My chest was heavy, as if heavy chains and weights had embedded themselves around my heart and my lungs. The heavy fog of emotional pain was relentless. My stomach turned. My body was denying the truth before me. My soul was starting to ache. I remember calling my mom and telling her that Angelo was going to die, and that I needed her to come to the hospital as fast as she could with our children. What an awful phone call to receive. We got up to be with Angelo, and the door swung open. Behind the door was a wheelchair and 4 nurses who said, "Nikki and Jim, we need you to go to the NICU right now." I jumped in the chair while my husband held my hand. We held on to each other so tightly. I remember being wheeled down the hall and hearing the babies crying in the nursery, and I was going to say goodbye to mine. I begged for my nurse not to leave me. I didn't want this to happen. I wanted it to stop. We had entered the NICU room where Angelo was being treated. The team had been doing CPR on my son. They were bathing him. They were pushing all kinds of meds, chest compressions. His tiny little body was dark and gray and swollen. We were numb. I stared at my child in disbelief. I couldn't move. I couldn't talk. I held his hand and I told the neonatologist that I understood what was happening, and I knew they had done everything they could to keep him here. It was very obvious that he was going to die, and I wanted to hold him when that happened. Angelo was baptized. His heart rate declined. He was extubated and placed skin to skin on my chest. We held onto our son and each other ever so tightly and with so much love as his tiny little heart slowly stopped. He He drew his last breath and he relaxed into me. Just 12 hours, 12 and a half hours after he took his first breath in this world, when he was pink, crying, and full of life. My mom arrived at the hospital with our older children, a very close friend, my wonderful OB, our babysitter. We all held Angelo. I remember my daughter Gia being very sad that Angelo couldn't come home with us. Her and Calvin were so brave to show their emotions and to love on their little brother for the very short time they had with him. Angelo had died and love still remained so deep and so strong in that room. We bathed him, we dressed him. I remember feeling so rushed to take all that time with him and take it in so very quickly. Handing my son over to another person and walking away was indescribable. Such a conflict for a mother and a father to leave their child behind. I'm not sure I could ever explain that moment to anyone, and I'm sure a lot of you can agree with me on that. I remember collapsing within myself. I imagined I was a mound of sand that was just blown away by the biggest storm possible. I felt as if I had two bodies that were overlapping each other. One body felt the most intense pain imaginable, and the other that was numb to all feeling. By this time, a blood culture had confirmed that Angelo had died from GBS sepsis. Pure shock is a look that I saw on every medical professional's face. Pure shock to myself, someone that felt like she knew everything there was to know about OB. Fear set in as we went to leave the hospital. My body was so confused. Why did I leave without my baby? I need to feed my baby. I need to take care of my baby. I am a mother still. I have learned through our loss that your body wakes you up to care for your infant. Your infant doesn't always wake you. Angelo was loved his entire existence on this earth. We loved him in life and we still love him in death. The grips of death took our precious baby, and it will never take our love. He is ours. If I could have breathed life back into him, I would have. It is so surreal, even to this day, to look back at the time and recollect the events that took place. I have found that time does nothing. It just allows the grieving to become more accustomed to their uncomfortable feelings. I am very comfortable with what most people would call uncomfortable things in life. We can grieve and we can be joyous alongside with grief. After all, grief is love. The wide range of emotions in which a human being can possess is extremely vast. Personally, I have found that being concrete and raw about my feelings is of help to me. If you ask how I'm doing, you're totally gonna get how I'm feeling. And everybody in these first 2 rows has seen that. I could have never imagined the feelings I would have and the confusion that those feelings would bring in my world after the loss of my son. I could speak for hours about the effects of grief and child loss, about the toll that it takes on our bodies and our souls. What I have felt walking the earth after Angelo, but you already know this. You feel it. Life is so mercilessly relentless, and that's what makes grieving hard. Our biggest fears have become a new reality. We are surviving. We weren't given a choice. The world keeps spinning, and the sun still rises and sets. Our precious children who have left this earth have molded us into fierce grief survivors, and they have taken part of us with them. They are our special little people who we long to touch, to hold, to share with this world. We are proud to be their parents. We are proud to carry such pain because it stems from the biggest love. The love for your children and for Angelo. I could only be grateful when I realized that I would rather have known you for a moment than never at all. I would rather endure this felt pain about living you than to never have seen your face or spoken your name. I would rather be yours and you be mine, regardless of the sorrow, the sleepless nights, and the years I will walk this earth, carrying you in my heart. Thank you all so very much for allowing me to share the story of my son, Angelo Tasson.